number of hormones tend to decrease as people age. We want to maintain optimal levels of these, and that's what's going to be discussed in this video. Hello Kindred Longevity Lifestyle Designers, this is Zach here with secretsoflongevity.com. This is another video in the series that I've been doing for a number of months. I have a couple videos, and you can always check out this link that is going to remain on the screen for the entire video. That'll take you to the sort of table of contents video that has links to all the other videos on this topic. So it's part of the What Causes Aging series, and in this I'm exploring different theories of aging, and in reality they're all very legitimate. There is no one shot, one magic bullet cause of aging that we can just tackle and wipe out and become immortal from. There's many different things that go on in the body, things that break down, things that accumulate, things that stop working as optimally as they should as we get older. And by learning about each sort of section of the different areas which can be classified as a cause of aging, sort of a root cause of aging, we can tackle those, eliminate them or address them in some way, and have a much healthier, longer lived, and hopefully more fulfilling life. So the body has glands that produce hormones, and this is a very complex area of health. Obviously I'm not an endocrinologist, I'm not a hormone specialist. That would be someone you'd want to work with if you're in a severe state of some sort of hormonal imbalance. There's going to be situations where you might need some sort of drug therapy. I'm talking about sort of the pharmaceutical grade hormonal therapy. And this is if we're talking about very severe imbalances, to get you back on track to a point where you can perhaps look at some of the things I'm going to talk about in this video. But perhaps if you're taking your health in your own hands, this is all you need, is to look at certain lifestyle factors and make the necessary changes to help yourself bring balance to your overall hormonal profile. So one of the best things you can do is actually to get tested for different hormonal levels, find out where you're at, do this yearly or bi-yearly, or if you're in a severe state, then more frequently, to understand the levels of these different hormones and also start to get a picture of how those levels are changing. 'Cause levels can change very drastically, very quickly. It's good to do both blood levels of certain hormones and saliva tests of certain other hormones. And again, these things vary. You want to have, like any kind of blood work, you want to have multiple tests over a span of time to really get an understanding of where you're at in these different levels. So working with a qualified healthcare professional on that is the way to go. Now, there's complexity in the difference between the genders and what's optimal for health. And furthermore, it is commonly understood that female hormonal health is much more complicated than male hormonal health. I'm by no means going to go into every hormone the body makes and how to balance it. It's much more of a bigger picture balancing act as opposed to trying to isolate individual things and raise or lower them. You really just want to work on the root causes in the body of what could be causing an imbalance and then bringing about that overall balance. But I'm going to discuss what would look like a good balance for both men and women. And those optimal levels are going to vary depending on your age. Obviously, if you're 12 years old, your hormonal profile is going to look vastly different than if you're 25. And again, it's going to look vastly more different than if you're 60. However, it is possible for a 60-year-old to have a hormonal profile that's similar to a 25-year-old. And that would be what's optimal for health, as opposed to trying to go too far back in time. But we do want to also take into account that there's this idea that some people have that we don't want to tamper with things as we age. And it might be bad to think of things as anti-aging and trying to get back the youth of a 25-year-old to 20-year-old, somewhere in that range of sort of the peak hormonal output that people have at that time in their life. But it is possible, and it is perfectly healthy to do that when it's done in a balanced way. This is the focus of a lot of anti-aging doctors with their practices, and they use different methods, some of which I'm probably going to be talking about in this video. But number one thing is you want to be doing the basics. You want to be exercising regularly, making sure you're doing enough resistance exercise. That's more important for hormonal health than the aerobic exercise. And that's because you have the resistance, which builds the muscle mass, which helps keep fat off the body, keeps the testosterone levels up, keeps the fat-burning hormones up, and overall it has an anti-aging effect. That will also help control the hormones of stress that break down muscle tissue, that add body fat to the body. And you also want to manage your stress levels with various types of practices, whether it's yoga, meditation, breathing, prayer, getting out into nature, addressing underlying emotional issues, and overall just doing what you love in life, spending time with family. All these things contribute to healthy hormone levels. It's no surprise. Another big thing is getting enough sunlight and exposure to vitamin D producing light sources. This is going to vary depending on where you live in the world, but being out in nature is going to have an effect on your hormone levels, of course. Then you also want to take into consideration your sleeping schedule. Are you getting 8 or more hours a day? Ideally, that 8 to 9 hour range is what's going to be necessary for everyone who's even remotely active. The more active you are, the more sleep you need. I don't recommend people getting less than 8 hours of sleep a day, because if you are, some people talk about getting 7 hours, 6 to 7 hours. That might be alright if you're doing no physical activity, but physical activity is healthy, and when you have physical activity, you're going to be needing more sleep because it's going to be breaking down tissue. You need more time to rebuild that in the sleeping phase. So if you just happen to not be getting enough sleep because you just wake up at a certain time, starting to implement these healthy living strategies are going to help deepen your sleep and also increase and balance those hormone levels that contribute to the deeper sleep, the healthier organs, which in turn prevent you from waking up to A, go to the bathroom, B, it might be your liver becoming more active because it's a little bit toxic, it might be your lungs that are waking up because they're congested. So there's a lot of causes that disrupt sleep, and by getting to a healthier place, you're going to be able to sleep deeper. And sleep is a prime time hormonal production event, because melatonin, which could be called the master of all the hormones, is produced in your sleep. And you want to have complete darkness in the room that you're sleeping. You want to eliminate light sources during that time frame leading up to when you go to sleep. So you don't want to have, such as what I have in here, is the UV lights that have full spectrum UV output, because they're going to be degrading the melatonin in the brain. I mean, obviously if you're working you have them on, but one thing you can do as you're going to bed, if you're still needing a light source, you can even read with this, is have a red light. And have this on at night if you are staying up a bit past this time of the sun being up, because the red light, a bulb that just puts out red, almost like infrared light, is going to allow your brain to start increasing that production of the melatonin, which does have a number of anti-aging effects as well, that you want to have produced in your sleep, and you don't want to degrade from the excess light exposure. Obviously a computer screen, that's going to be putting out a lot of those blue light pigments, and also the not the UV light from the computer screen, but we get the UV light from other sources that we want to eliminate in the evening or late evening going into nighttime. And then of course during the day we want to have the production and exposure to UV light, and if you are spending a lot of time indoors, use a full spectrum light during the day so that you have, again, that balancing of your circadian rhythms. You're not spending too much time in the dark. You're not relying on coffee and things to wake you up. If you have optimal exposure to UV light during the day, you won't need the stimulants, you won't need these cortisol-enhancing, adrenaline-enhancing things that really do degrade on the overall health of our body in the long term. So why do we want to have good hormonal output? Well, if we just want to consider the vanity aspect of this, this is going to be a big motivator for people I know. Having a large production of a lot of these sort of hormones associated with youth, we're going to be much better off and looking much healthier and younger. So number one is testosterone. It's not the rage hormone that so many people associate with it. That's actually more associated with low testosterone levels. High testosterone is more correlated with calm, collected type behavior. It does have a tendency to be higher in people in leadership positions, whether it's leadership in a business or a leadership role in something like crime. So people often think of criminals having a lot of testosterone, but really it's people who are motivated to do things who have high testosterone, and it's the underlying values that are separate. So if you have good values, you're not going to suddenly become a violent person. if you happen to raise your testosterone level a little bit. Good testosterone is going to lead to healthier, more vibrant, youthful looking skin. It'll give you that youthful glow to your skin. It'll keep the collagen and other properties in the skin tight and youthful. That's an important thing for both men and women. There's going to be also the effect of your libido and sex drive, which is associated with youth. You want to maintain that as long as you can into your elder years, of course. There's no reason for that to dissipate. There's also vital qualities in your hair and nails. Those are affected by hormones. We want to maintain those. So healthy, youthful people, no matter what age they're at, are going to have good hormone levels. So that should be a big motivating factor for many of you. Of course, there's the internal health aspects. You're going to have much better organ function, reduced rates of all forms of chronic diseases. They're all across the board: diabetes, cancer, heart disease. They're all associated with wonky hormonal profiles in terms of low testosterone, low progesterone, high estrogens. And by the way, in women, it's not so much the estrogens that women are good to have, it's actually the progesterone that women want to have up high, and testosterone could be seen as the equivalent in men. We're going to talk about these two hormones first for both men and women. Men, that main one is testosterone. For women, it's progesterone. Of course, both men and women have testosterone and progesterone as well. Like I explained, men have a higher level of testosterone with progesterone, sort of backing up, preventing the excess accumulation of estrogens, whereas women, they have the higher progesterone and just a bit of testosterone, which helps with the physical beauty, heart health, keeping cancers at bay, etc. So women, when they're in their most fertile years, they sort of cycle through different levels of hormones throughout their whole cycle. So it's not a one-shot, let's just jack this one hormone up and let's suppress and wipe out all these other hormones. You do have to let your body do what it naturally does. And with things, when you get into progesterone cream and these other concentrated therapies, you want to work with someone, as it can throw things off and can affect your fertility. It can affect future problems that you might want to avoid. So while estradiol and estrone are generally seen as the most carcinogenic estrogens, there's going to be points in a woman's cycle and also in female puberty leading up to that. They need to have these hormones, of course, that pushes them into these different areas. There's estrogens that help shed the uterine lining, and it's progesterone that's at its highest in that most fertile period during the whole cycle. Once women have reached menopause and they're no longer shedding their uterine lining every month, they can take progesterone cream with more regularity. I would suggest working with a practitioner if you're going to consider the use of progesterone cream for anti-aging effects or the beneficial effects it has on any sort of issue you might have. But I'd highly recommend working with practitioners because, again, if you're in that period where you're fertile and you have a period, you want to be cycling its use. You don't want to be using it daily, whereas after menopause, it's more appropriate to use it daily or on a more consistent basis. Now, the foods and herbs I'm going to talk about can be used at any point in a woman's life, hormonal health life, and it's not going to be quite so cut and dry as to its effects on the body. It's going to be more balancing as opposed to just jacking something up and wiping out the effects of other hormones. So we want to stimulate the production of progesterone. It can improve fertility. If you've been on the pill for a long time, that's something you want to get off of. I highly recommend women don't use the pill just because of its long-term effects with increasing rates of cancer, causing problems in the long term with hormonal levels. And there's other deleterious effects you can, I'm sure, look up on your own if that's something you're not aware of. So if you're recovering from that, or you just overall need to revitalize your hormone levels, one way to boost progesterone, we're going to talk about foods and herbs for every hormone I'm going to talk about here, but some foods that you can use are maca, that has progesterone precursors in it. You can also use grass-fed raw dairy products. Those have a certain amount of progesterone, significant enough an amount of it in it that can be absorbed and utilized by the body. And then also egg yolks. Of course, you can eat the whole egg. I'm just saying the yolk of the egg has usable progesterone in it. And in that case, I recommend getting pastured eggs that are free-range, not hormonally treated chickens, obviously. And the best way to eat the yolk is raw. Of course, it's okay to eat cooked and raw eggs, but having some degree of raw eggs in your diet will give you that hormonal boost. It's easy to make mayonnaise and other things with that. I've got a great mayonnaise recipe you can check out here if you want to see how easy it is to make mayonnaise with just a few egg yolks. Now, some really powerful herbs I'd recommend using are chasteberry, also known as Vitex. That's one of the more popular ones for increasing progesterone levels and also keeping estrogens in balance, the ones that are more carcinogenic and what we could call bad estrogens. Another one that people talk about is wild yam. It's a root from a Mexican yam. People on the internet are talking a lot about just eating yams. Regular yams that are sweet potatoes don't contain progesterone precursors, but this specific herb does, and it's been shown beneficial, while not completely confirmed by science as having that effect of increasing progesterone. It's had the effects in observational trials and by long-term use by herbalists and things that it does have an effect on the hormones. So that's one other thing to consider. Then turmeric, oregano oil, or oregano in general, and thyme have all been shown to be very beneficial in increasing the production of progesterone and increasing fertility and things like that. So take those into consideration. Some of the things I've talked about and other things I talked about in this video you can always find in the links below if you want to find a source for that. Don't have everything I mentioned down there, obviously not the foods, just mostly the herbs and things. And with maca, I just want to also say, I mentioned it as a food because most people underdose on maca. It's recommended in the 3 to 6 tablespoons a day range, which can be a little bit much for some people, so at that point you might want to look at taking an extract, whether it's capsuled or just a gelatinized extract, which you can sort of do the equivalent of in teaspoons they would do in tablespoons. So most gelatinized maca, you can just do 1 tablespoon of that, and that's the equivalent of 3 tablespoons if it was just the ground up root. Now for men, increasing testosterone and a whole host of other androgens, which we're not going to get into, just to sort of talk about the most well-known one. Number one in the food section is going to be red meat. So many people that get into a restrictive dieting where they remove animal foods in general, but specifically red meat, they're going to have a lowering of the production of testosterone. One of the best things for raising it is just bringing that red meat back in there. Eating it a little bit on a daily basis or a weekly basis, having a nice meal that is based around some sort of red meat. And that's going to be any kind of ruminant animal. It doesn't have to be beef every time. It could be bison, elk, venison, moose, goat, lamb, and of course beef as well. Then you have the maca, which has, again, those precursors to a wide range of beneficial hormones. One of them is also testosterone. Another great food is oysters. Getting those into the diet from time to time. They're just so jam-packed with zinc. So any food that's really rich in zinc is going to be testosterone boosting. It's also going to be beneficial for other hormones to get the zinc. Progesterone, you need zinc for progesterone synthesis. So a lot of these things I'm talking about in one category are actually working across the board and raising and balancing a lot of these hormones. Celery, which has some precursors to testosterone-like compounds. Spinach has some direct precursors. Of course, onions and the foods in the whole family of onions, like garlic and all the allium family plants, have testosterone-boosting qualities. The brassicas, like the broccoli, cabbage, kale, cauliflower, these all have testosterone-enhancing properties. It actually does a lot of it by removing excess estrogen from the body and letting that carry out of the body. With brassicas, you want to just be careful if you've got thyroid issues. You want to make sure you're cooking them or even lay off brassicas entirely while recovering from any thyroid issues. One of the most potent ways of getting the compounds that are found in brassicas is by taking broccoli sprouts. I've got a video here you can learn about sprouting, and you can buy a package of broccoli sprouts from your local health food store or finding them online from sprouting.com, and you just sprout those in a jar. Add those to salads, add them to sandwiches and other things, and you get plenty of these estrogen-removing compounds that are much more concentrated amounts, because if you think of each sprout, individual seed, as being as potent almost as a full-grown piece of broccoli, you're eating like 1,000 heads of broccoli. Obviously they're more reduced, but in their by size and weight, it's far more concentrated in those beneficial compounds. And these are particularly important to keep raw. They break down when being cooked, so the broccoli and brassicas you want to be eating raw, which kind of, again, goes against that idea of the thyroid. health, but that's where you want to do that balancing act of not using them if you have a thyroid issue. And as with any glandular problem, you can always take the extracts of that gland to rejuvenate it. So with testosterone, a great thing to take if you are having pretty severe problems is prairie oysters, or the extract of some sort of testicle tissue from an animal. So generally the thing is the beef testicle, because a bull obviously is a very virile animal, large and in charge, and they can make tinctures of it or an extract, or you can actually just get them whole sometimes and add them to food. Literally just fry them up whole. That's going to be what prairie oysters are called, or you can add them to burgers and things like that. And that works for other glands as well. People take thyroid when they have thyroid issues. People take adrenal gland or adrenal cortexes when they have problems with their adrenal glands. Just look into that if that's something that interests you. With this booming anti-aging movement, one of the most talked about and well-known hormones, or even one of the most controversial ones, is human growth hormone. Human growth hormone, or HGH for short, is produced in very high amounts when people are in their most youthful state, and people have been taking injections of this and having really dramatic results with it. I personally am not a fan of injectable hormones, as we don't know a lot of long-term effects from some of these. Specifically, HGH could be connected with increased cancer rates, and there's a lot of easy ways to boost levels of it through diet, exercise, and herbs that is quite effective. Number one herb for boosting HGH is going to be goji berries. These Chinese berries, it's a Chinese herb, but can be eaten like a food, a superfood, is the only known food that is an HGH secretagogue. That means it actually stimulates the pituitary gland to help the body produce more human growth hormone. It's not going to suddenly make you turn into Andre the Giant, who, by the way, produced too much human growth hormone, but it's going to start improving that anti-aging effect that human growth hormone has in the body, and over the long term, daily sustained use, just a small handful a day, you're going to have some of the beneficial effects from that. Now, a major way that HGH has a beneficial impact on the body is that down the cascade, and when we talk about a hormone cascade, we've got things that happen in the body and they cascade down, affecting different things and sort of producing other hormones as they cascade down into their other forms. HGH stimulates the production of IGF-1, one of many growth factors the body produces, and that is a very big one that is actually looked at by a lot of hormone tests, and that indicates various things. Again, we want to have very high levels of this for our athletic prowess, when we want to be youthful and vibrant. Not necessarily something we want to boost up there if we're suffering from a chronic disease like cancer, because it can stimulate the growth of cells that are carcinogenic. But we largely see studies of that nature being done on people who inject straight IGF-1. This hasn't been connected with some of the things I'm going to be talking about. There's a lot of fear on the internet about taking things like colostrum, and people just randomly saying that this is going to increase tumor cell production. That has not been the case in any study I've ever seen, and it's actually been shown to be beneficial on cancer treatments. There's people who take colostrum as a cancer treatment, so in my mind this simply shows if people are getting a beneficial effect from it in a clinical setting, it's not going to be causing rampant tumor growth. If you want to learn more about those studies, I've got a video here on colostrum, which I'm about to talk about, that looks at the scientific data there and goes more into depth of this issue if that is a concern for you. Colostrum is the first milking of a mammal. It's produced by all mammals, and humans have bred cattle to produce a large amount of dairy in excess of what they just need for their own young that are born to that animal. So there's around 4 times as much colostrum that's produced by certain breeds of cows that is then the excess collected after the cow's gotten its share, because it does need it to survive. And that's in the farmer's interest for the calf to survive, of course, so they take the excess after the cattle's been fed and use that as a product that you can find in the links below. And this is one of the richest sources of IGF-1 in the world. A whole host of other growth factors, 87 growth factors in total, very immune boosting, very regrowing to certain tissues that can degenerate over time. A key one being the thymus gland in the chest tends to shrink over time, but this use of colostrum can rejuvenate and rebuild that. You're also going to have a really good rebuilding and regeneration of joint tissue and collagen. And overall, it's going to be very healing to the digestive tract as well. Another food that's very rich in IGF-1, and this is easily assimilable and usable IGF-1, is elk antler velvet. This can also be from deer or any other cervid animal, meaning an animal that grows antlers every year and sheds them. And in that lining of the velvet is concentrated as potent growth factors, as well as a whole host of other growth factors that stimulate repair and regeneration in the body. You can click this link here if you want to learn more about elk antler. This is a video I've done recently. It's collected very sustainably, and with the elk, it is more local than the deer that are harvested in New Zealand or China, where quality is not necessarily as rigorously adhered to. And another great IGF-1 booster, and actually has a much broader range on things like progesterone, and might be more desirable by women if they're wanting the more yin effects, which could be a little cooler, or by anyone that wants that more yin tonic effect, is deer placenta. There's IGF-1 in deer placenta. I believe there's also progesterone and a number of other hormones and hormone precursors that help build up these things in the body. Another very crucial hormone that is made by the body, largely in the adrenal glands by both men and women, is DHEA. This hormone is very much indicative of your overall stress levels. When it goes down and cortisol goes up, we are obviously in a state of stress. Ways of keeping this in good health are by using virtually all of the things I've been talking about, having enough of those steroid precursors, which the biggest one is cholesterol, so you want to be consuming some good animal foods. If you're a strict vegan or vegetarian, I don't know what to say except perhaps look at using some coconut oil, coconut products to really make sure you're getting those saturated fats that can be converted into steroid hormones, but the animal cholesterol is much more usable by the body. You also really want to make sure you're getting enough magnesium, so any magnesium-rich foods are going to be boosting and sustaining to DHEA levels in the body. Some studies have shown that when someone has had a plane flight, it really causes DHEA levels to crash, which can be likened to what's known as jet lag. Biggest thing you need to do as soon as you get off a plane is to get grounded, whether it's barefoot on the ground or it's using a grounding pad. Having a shower, cold shower even, is better. It helps also slough off those sort of static EMF charges from being in the plane. This could be both the combination of being up further out of the Earth's magnetic field, as well as being really in close proximity to a lot of EMFs from the engine, the electronics in the plane, the greater amounts of radiation that we're exposed to from outer space. Because we're higher up in the atmosphere, there's less atmosphere between us and the cosmos, which has a lot of radiation bombarding the planet at all times. So doing everything you can to manage stress levels around travel time in that way, but also just in general, stress can lower DHEA levels. So using things like rhodiola, again, wild yam has some DHEA precursors, and the other big one is going to also be maca. Taking that on a regular basis or around times when you might have things happening that would lower DHEA levels is a good strategy to put into place. I briefly touched on it earlier, but both melatonin and vitamin D could be seen as polar opposites. Vitamin D is actually a hormone. We want to have optimal levels of that, probably the most active hormone in terms of the number of things it does in the body. We really want to maintain levels of this year-round to really prevent cancers, maintain bone health, maintain overall health, cardiovascular health. It's connected with everything. Is what the research is really starting to turn up. So maintaining vitamin D levels through sun exposure or supplementation if it's the winter and you live somewhere where you can't get it. Cod liver oil, vitamin D supplements. I prefer the food, egg yolks, cod liver oil, and these types of things are much richer and much more bioavailable because they're whole food. So you can find cod liver oil actually in the links below if you're interested in that. Melatonin, again, you get the production of it from just getting enough sleep, getting to bed, and having that span of time where you're in complete darkness. And I'll show you right here, this is my window where I have a black shower curtain I've actually put up right next to my bed here so that I completely block out all light. Even in the morning when the sun's starting to come up, I have a very good barrier there. It's actually, there's another thing in behind there because the shower curtain does have a certain amount of light that can pass through it, but there's another one in behind there that acts as the thicker thing to block out the light, and then that just sort of keeps the straggler sun rays out from my bedroom. And then of course when I get up, I open that up and I get the sunlight, and it immediately wakes me up because this light stimulation starts to tell the body that it's time to turn off the production of melatonin and to get that and convert it actually over into serotonin. Thyroid is a very key gland that a lot of people are suffering from today. Basically you want to make sure you're getting tons of iodine in your diet. Big thing is sea vegetables. Kelp is the richest source of iodine in any sea vegetable. You can find that at the links below if you want to include some iodine powder. I put it into everything, whether it's smoothies, food, dressings, things like that. But you want to get used to using it because you don't want to put so much that you actually start to taste it, because it has a very weird taste. Needless to say, it's a seaweed. But getting around a teaspoon per day spread out into all these different things, you're going to actually be getting 4 to 5 milligrams of iodine a day that will optimize your thyroid health, prevent the accumulation of radioactive iodine, and overall is going to maintain that metabolism, because the thyroid really controls metabolism. And if you have thyroid issues, look online for some tips around that. I might do a video in the future about that. Not overly my area of specialty, but many of the things I've been talking about in this video can actually be beneficial for thyroid as well, except, of course, for the brassicas. You want to cut back on the brassicas, the brassica family plants, if you suffer from any issues around thyroid. You also want to cut back on polyunsaturated fat sources if you have thyroid issues. Polymonounsaturated fats you want to cut back a bit on as well. Lastly, I'll just touch on a few hormones you want to keep in low levels, and these are going to range depending on different people, what their activity levels are, where they're at in their life, their age, etc. The big ones are, of course, cortisol and adrenaline as the stress hormones. Prolactin is another stress hormone, a bit different in terms of it being more of a metabolic stress as opposed to outside influence stress that causes it to rise. Taking herbs like holy basil, jagulon, which is also known as gynostemma, taking reishi and eating a lower carb diet can all help control cortisol and adrenaline levels. Another big thing is taking passion flower and any of the brassicas, again talking about those because they can latch onto estrogens, phytoestrogens, xenoestrogens, and help carry the excess of those out of the body. And that's actually getting into the topic of the estrogens as being hormones that are not beneficial to have floating around in excess. Obviously men need a lot less than women, but even so women don't want to have too much of those going on, the estradiol and estrone. So those latter two things that I was talking about, the big one being passion flower, helps remove excess of this out of the body and can be used by a lot of people for that purpose. Of course, you want to eliminate plastics in your environment, the excess exposure to them, whether it's plastic bags, plastic containers, plastic everything. Start converting everything in your home over to non-plastics. If you're going to be building a house, get natural fiber carpeting. Use non-off-gassing paint. Start using these things and being more environmentally conscious, which also tends to be health conscious as well, because we don't have these xenoestrogens, which are synthetic estrogens, in our environment, getting into our body and literally are oil soluble, so they can literally just come right in through the skin. We want to start eliminating synthetic fabrics that we wear on our body, adhering to organic cotton, organic hemp, linen, wool, and these other natural fibers that do not have this negative impact on us that we'd get from the synthetic ones, which are largely made from petrochemicals anyways, and we need to do our part on the planet and start cutting back our use of petrochemicals as well. Everyone knows that. I mentioned the low carbohydrate diet. That's good for controlling insulin, which is another hormone which can have rampant deleterious effects in the long run. Probably going to do a video in this series just on blood sugar issues and insulin and the effects it has. And insulin is also tied in with advanced glycation end products, which was another topic in this series. You can check out this one here, or of course you can always go to that main video, and the link to that one is there too. And that was a very good video I did on the effects of excess fructose and glucose running rampant through the body and causing this change of the proteins and fats of our body to these more rigid structures, which causes the breakdown of tissues. So I hope that wasn't an overload. These hormones in our body that we want to maintain good levels of are very important. It's much more complex than I was able to go to in this video, even though it was as long as it was. If you want to learn more, just get out there and do your research. There is always other videos on my channel. You can always check by using the search box on the main page of my channel and just typing in something that's on your mind. I have other videos about some of these hormones you can look up, and of course you can always check out other videos on forms of aging, causes of aging, by going to the main table of contents with this link here. So check out those links below if you're interested in any of the herbs, products, and things I talked about that can be beneficial in bringing about these hormonal balance, improved overall health, especially as you get older. And then also let me know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe if you haven't done that before. With that, take care and embrace life without limits.